Cardinal Dolan said what? So, who do you think won the big bout in the Oval Office? Plus, what if I told you that Zionists played a major role in Vatican II and that they actually lobbied the Pope to cancel the Latin Mass? Tonight, what really happened behind the scenes at Vatican II, and how did that impact geopolitics ever since? Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. I am Michael Mann. This is the Remnant Underground, just days before Ash Wednesday now. And Cardinal Dolan, we were going to start off with the Zelensky interplay with Trump, and we'll get to that in a moment. But Walter showed me this clip from Cardinal Dolan setting up for Ash Wednesday, and I think it's worth watching. Check this out.
You realize that tomorrow Ramadan starts? Ramadan is the season of penance for our Islamic brothers and sisters. Do they ever take it seriously? It's fasting and prayer. Now, I always remember, I wasn't here in New York long, I got into a cab, and I had a bag of some water, and I was so thirsty, I took some water and I drank it, and I said to the driver, would you like some water? And he said, you bet I'd like some water. I am very thirsty, but it's Ramadan, and I cannot take water till the sunset. That's how seriously they take their fasting and prayer. Now, I tell you that to shame you, because Ash Wednesday's coming up, all right? Ash Wednesday is this coming Wednesday, and that's kind of our Catholic Ramadan. So let's unite with our Islamic brothers and sisters in prayer and fasting. See you at Easter.
Well, no, that's very good, Your Eminence. Thank you very much for reminding us of that. I wish I could talk to Cardinal Dolan about this, because you can see he's trying to do a good thing here. What he doesn't see is that it's not the fault of the Catholic people who don't know what to do and have no idea. They've lost their Catholic identity to such an extent they don't even know what's happening. And you think about every time Ash Wednesday rolls around and the American bishops come out with a statement, and nobody's sure. Is it a black fast anymore? Are you supposed to abstain from meat? I guess so. And then is there anything else you're supposed to do throughout Lent? Is it still a mortal sin to eat meat on Fridays in Lent? I'm not sure. Every feast day that comes along, the bishops say you don't have to go to Mass now. You can go to Mass on Sunday if you want. There's all these options that have been going on. Like, again, ever since Pope Paul VI, when the church suddenly came out and said you don't have to abstain from meat on Friday, Catholics can substitute something else. And of course, nobody substitutes anything else ever for Friday. And so we lose our Catholic identity. And then Lent rolls around, and I quite agree with Cardinal Dolan. Our Islamic brothers and sisters do take their faith much more seriously than most Catholics do. But see, that's just the point. Why is that? It's because they're told they have to, like there's a need for it. And even at the end there, where Cardinal Dolan's trying to do the right thing, he says, let's unite with our Islamic brothers and sisters in prayer and fasting. Well, that's nice, but how about we unite with our Catholic brothers and sisters and do the right thing? How about we start getting instruction on what it means to be a Catholic? We're going to talk about this tonight. The crisis in leadership, the crisis in Catholic identity, which is now impacting everything, not just our spiritual lives as we now approach Lent again, but also the political life, our political lives, our cultural lives. Everything is impacted by this virtual disappearance of any clear teaching from the Catholic Church. And this is like what Vatican II hath wrought. Nobody knows what it means to be Catholic. And so you see chaos everywhere. We're trying to get through this political situation right now where you see the same thing. A strong moral Catholic voice is conspicuous by its absence even in politics. And you see chaos. We saw chaos just today, in fact, in the Oval Office when Trump and President Green Tea Zelensky got together.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's exactly what you're doing.
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
You will feel influenced.
We're going to feel very good.
Now, on the one hand, this is very funny. On the other hand, I've never seen anything like that. Have you? On the other hand, if there is another hand, you think you can almost, it was such a dumpster fire, that meeting in the Oval Office, that you can almost see Trump calling up Vladimir last night. Hey, Vlad, check out Fox tomorrow afternoon, because we are going to blow this baby up, right? It just seems like it's almost too good to be true. Zelensky looks like a fool. They're scolding him. He looks like a child. You know what I mean? Like, it's fun to watch, but it's a little unsettling, isn't it?
Pretty close. How are you? Pretty shut.
He's all dressed up today.
Of course, again, it fits right into like last week's Underground, the theme that we were trying to say, this whole thing. Zelensky, Mr. Green Tea, this LGBT BS promoting former comic, he's a total fraud. Well, obviously Trump knows that, Vance knows that, everybody knows that, right? But we've been operating under this fraudulent system, this lie, this fake news for such a long time, right? For years. So much damage is done. In this case, so many bodies, so many dead bodies strewn all over Eastern Europe. So it's really not funny, is it? This Zelensky guy, this angry little enfant terrible, not one more US dollar should be sent to this little charlatan's offshore piggy bank, right? I mean, it's over, right? Can it be over now? No! I don't know. And then you hope that if Trump, Vance can do this to Zelensky, which I think is the end of the little Mr. Green Tea, is it possible maybe that they can begin to see through the other dictator, tyrant on the world stage right now, Bibi Netanyahu? Can we get serious about what's happening in Israel now? I'm just so interested in trying to wake people up.
The Second Vatican Council took place between 1962 and 1965.
You're going to think these two things are completely unrelated. So what's he talking about? But I want to challenge you to see if you can answer this question. What does the Second Vatican Council, what does it have to do with the collapse of Christianity worldwide? What does it have to do with this war in Ukraine? What does it have to do with genocide in Israel? And guess what? The answer to that question is everything. Vatican II has everything to do. The revolution in the Catholic Church has everything. Of course, it predates Vatican II by 50 years. We've done that so many times, you know that to be true, right? But it has everything to do. The revolution in the Catholic Church is at the heart of all this. And I'm going to prove this to you tonight. I'm going to show you how Zionists might blow some of your minds. Zionists are the biggest supporters and promoters of the Second Vatican Council in the Catholic Church. I have the clips to prove it. So all you have to do now is open up your mind to something that maybe you have never even thought about until tonight. You're not going to hear this anywhere else. So if you're still supporting, I see people online, it just shocks me, traditional Catholics, I am a Zionist. Well, I can only think that they actually don't know what that means. They have no idea what that means. The betrayal of Jesus Christ that is involved with, I am a Zionist. So this is not about attacking Jews. This is about attacking us, correcting us, reprimanding us, Catholics who've so lost the Christian identity that we will say with a straight face, I am a Zionist. If you're one of the ones saying that, well, buckle up for the next few moments because we're going to tell you the rest of the story. But before we get to that, I want to just offer a brief word on tonight's sponsor of the Remnant Underground.
My name is Scott Jones, and I am the director of Our Lady of Victory School. We were founded in 1977 and are the oldest Catholic homeschool program in the United States. With a solid traditional religion program, published before 1960, and other textbooks used by major homeschool programs and parochial schools, parents can have the peace of mind knowing they are using a sound and trustworthy curriculum. Whether you are a first-time homeschooler or a veteran with years of homeschooling experience behind you, Our Lady of Victory is here to help you. Homeschooling is the best option for your children to receive a quality education and save their souls. So welcome to the homeschool community, and thank you for choosing Our Lady of Victory School.
Vatican II and Zionism. What's going on? What's the connection? Why is politics trumping Christianity all around the world? Why are Christians losing track of what it even means to be Christian? I mean, these Christian Zionists, and we're not going to spend too much time on that because we've already done a few shows on it, but these people they don't know. To me, they're frightening. There's a fanaticism there. There's a cult-like behavior there based on the Schofield Bible and heretical notions about Scripture. Monsters are coming out and calling themselves Christians now. These guys are like out-Naziing the Nazis.
Shouldn't be spending a dime on humanitarian aid. I agree. It should be like Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Get over quick.
But here's the thing, before we beat up on that idiot, because he is, I got to admit that we've got our own problems, you know? I see this every day. I see traditional Catholics trying to justify genocide in Gaza, for example, in the same way. I saw one just the other day. Palestinians are mostly Muslim, man! Don't you know that? As though that somehow ends the discussion. When did this happen to us? I mean, is it okay now for Christians to support genocide so long as the right people's kids are being killed?
A common argument Western Christians use is that at least Israel is fighting Muslims, so that must make them the good guys. But this is nonsense. First of all, the Middle East isn't just full of Muslims, but also has many Christians and people of other faiths. In some places, Muslims and Christians live together without violence. Many Christian groups in the Middle East have indeed sided against Israel. While Shia Bashar al-Assad of Syria protected Christians from persecution, Israel worked hand in glove with Islamic extremists Al-Qaeda, who are known for beheading Christians. It's not about Judaism versus Islam. Israel will work with any insane Islamic group as long as they don't get in the way of Zionism.
I know some of you are saying that we're obsessed with this issue. Well, maybe in a way we are. But I would argue at the moment that the entire conservative movement, certainly the Republican Party, is also obsessed over this issue. I mean, it is the defining issue for the Republican Party in 2025.
No one in history has ever stood with Israel and the Jewish people like I have.
Look, we've always got to protect Israel, in my opinion. They've been, you know, they're amazing people. What they've done it's an amazing thing.
That's right. What cause is dear to your heart?
Cause is dear to my Israel, the defense of Israel.
Foreign policy, Noam is unapologetically pro-Israel.
We're watching a president that has completely distanced himself from the nation of Israel and our long-standing ally.
She also pushed the controversial IHRA definition of anti-Semitism through into state law, describing the move as a means of ensuring the security of God's chosen people.
So I don't know if we're obsessed with it. I just don't know that there's a lot of bigger stories in this one. And we're all in the middle of it now. We're financing a genocide right now, and we're calling it conservative, right? Just like pretty soon we're going to be financing IVF and calling it conservative, pro-life. We have to talk about this, friends. You know? I mean, on this Israeli thing, Congressman Massey, he says that the entire Republican Party is monitored, and get this, monitored by the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, APAC.
For all the talk of foreign interference in elections these days, Israel always seems to get a pass. And it's not just Democrats. Zionists have similar control over Republican elections. Republican Representative Thomas Massey reported that every GOP member of Congress has an APAC guy who dictates how they should vote.
Well, I have Republicans who come to me on the floor and say, I wish I could vote with you today. Yours is the right vote, but I would just take too much flack back home. And I have Republicans who come to me and say, that's wrong what APAC is doing to you. Let me talk to my APAC person. By the way, everybody but me has an APAC person.
What does that mean, an APAC person?
It's like your babysitter, your APAC babysitter, who is always talking to you for APAC. They're probably a constituent in your district, but they are, you know, firmly embedded in APAC. And
every member has something like this?
I don't know how it works on the Democrat side, but that's how it works on the Republican side.
And that's pretty weird, don't you think? What's going on here? Why should this be?
Because Israel has run American foreign policy in the Middle East for 30 years. That's how it works.
So when you say, I'm a Zionist in a sort of virtue signaling way, do you really think you understand what that means? And they say, well, you know, if you question it, you're anti-Semitic. But what am I saying down here over and over again? What have I said over and over and over again? Listen to the Jews on this, damn it.
Christians that are critical hesitate to speak out because they're afraid of being smeared as anti-Semites. So you find very little criticism of Israel in the media. Part of it is, of course, the fact that we're dealing with Jews. So the non-Jewish world feels guilty for the Holocaust, feels guilty about the Jewish issue, and so on. It's used politically in a very effective way, in a very cynical way. I mean, it's very hard to say this, but I think it's true. It's seen as a very useful PR tool. You know, the way the government plays on the guilt in Europe over the Holocaust, so that you can't criticize us. Look what you did to us, you see. It intimidates non-Jews. It closes up discussion. It's very effective. And Israel is willing, for the sake of its PR and to silence critics, it's willing to sell the victims of the Holocaust.
The sad fact is that those 6 million Jews that died because of a fascist, racist ideology are cynically being used today to justify and support another fascist, racist ideology. As most of my family, on both sides, were amongst the victims of the Holocaust, I withdraw my permission from Israeli government and Zionists worldwide to use their death in such a hideous way.
Well, that's an Israeli soldier, former soldier in the Israeli army. That's who's talking there. Is he right? Is that what's going on? Well, you tell me. But I'm not going to comment on that because I have a completely different angle, the one that's in the purview of what we do here at the Remnant Underground. I know that something very similar to what was just described to us, something very similar to that happened in the Catholic Church. Now, this is where it gets very interesting for traditional Catholics who are laboring under the impression that the only thing that matters is just I'm a Latin Mass Catholic and that's it. Okay? Something happened in the Catholic Church is very similar at the time of the Second Vatican Council, Vatican II. And it just always comes back to Vatican II, doesn't it? Remember when the field marshal let the cat out of the bag some years ago?
I give you one example which for me was probably a crucial moment in my life. I traveled for the first time to Brazil. I met a priest who was known at that time as the priest of the poor people. His name was Don Elder Camara. So I invited him to the annual meeting in Davos. But then when I came back in Switzerland, I found out that actually he was forbidden at that time to speak in Switzerland because he was considered to be a communist. And that's where I had to stand to my values. Yeah. Even at the risk that I would have to give up the World Economic Forum.
Wow.
But it went very well. I have to say, the audience in Davos listened to him.
So what we're talking about here is one of the council fathers and a speaker at Davos. The guys who are setting up the World Economic Forum, the Great Reset, and the New World Order. He was one of them. You see what they actually have been trying to do? It's not just the Latin Mass. It's never been just the Latin Mass, although, as I say, the Latin Mass as touchstone of the faith is the thing they targeted because they're targeting us. You see? They're getting us out of the way. They're making us water carriers of a Masonic revolution, right? So, yeah. And I'm sorry if this is asking you to swallow too much at one time, but what's going on in Israel right now has everything to do with traditional Catholicism, with the traditional Catholic restoration, hanging on to the old faith, hanging on to the kingship of Christ. Nostra Aetate. What is Nostra Aetate? Nostra Aetate is one of the 16 documents of Vatican II. And it's very important to point out that since Nostra Aetate was pastoral and it was entering into a completely new area with not reiterating the previous teachings of the Church, it's not infallible. That's not my opinion. It absolutely is not an infallible document of Vatican II. So it's open to debate and discussion and critique, right? It's not an infallible document. But in effect, this revolutionary document, right? There's several documents of Vatican II that are beautiful and wonderful. We totally accept them. There are others, non-binding, non-infallible, which are revolutionary in nature and which contain time bombs that are detonating all over the Catholic world right now to the point where we don't even know who and what we are, right? So Nostra Aetate is one of the documents which in effect claims that non-Christians, this is the takeaway from that document, from the council. Non-Christians do not need to become Christian in order to be saved. The new covenant had somehow not fulfilled the old, that the old was still in play, right, for God's chosen people. See, to see what happens? The modernists in the church, the modernists of the Second Vatican Council, the folks who carried off the Catacombs Pact, they were the original Christian Zionists. Oh, the old law is still in play. And naturally, if the old covenant is still in play, then God's promises to the Jews are still in play, including territorial promises involving the Holy Land. It starts at Vatican II, friends. That was the surrender. That was the hoisting of the white flag that we have reneged now. We no longer believe that we are the one true church outside of which there is no salvation. As I always say, that's what the Catholic Church teaches infallibly. That's what we believe. It has nothing to do with crushing or killing or forcing baptism on anyone. That's part of the black legend, the lie. But that's what we believe. Let's say we're dead wrong about that. Okay, fine. So what? The problem is that's what the church taught. The church has never and can never renege on that officially. It's just been creating the impression that it's over. That's the old Catholicism. That's no longer what we believe. Almost every bishop in the church today conveys that impression. That's not what we believe anymore. Everybody's going to the hell. Even the Pope. All the religions lead to God. And this, again, is inherently Christophobic. It is anti-Christian. It is an attack on the word of Christ. You see? So the Holy Land now belongs to the Jews.
So I'm praying for Pope Francis, and I'm on a trip going to Europe, God willing, where we will have meetings at the Vatican. It is my sincere hope that Pope Francis will recover and that he will issue a statement that we have long asked of him that affirms, based on irrefutable biblical truths, that God gave the land of Israel, the Holy Land, to the Jewish people, the children of Israel, as an eternal inheritance. The Jewish people are the guardians, custodians, and owners of that land.
God made some promise to them in the Old Testament, and the Old Testament still stands. That's revolution, friends. And it's a pernicious error, as we pointed out a couple of episodes ago, because back on January 26, 1904, Theodor Herzl, who's the father of Zionism, we just talked about him, doesn't believe in God according to Orthodox Jews.
The founder of Zionists, his name was Theodor Herzl from Vienna, Austria. He don't believe in God. He don't believe in nothing.
Anyway, he's the father of Zionism. Now, he was granted an audience with Pope St. Pius X, and he begged support. He asked support for the Zionist vision, the Zionist dream to establish a Jewish state in Palestine. Pope St. Pius X responds to him. He says, "As I am the head of the Catholic Church, I cannot do this. The Jewish religion," this is the important part. St. Pius X says the Jewish religion was the foundation of our Catholic religion, our Christian religion, but it was superseded by the teachings of Jesus Christ, and we cannot concede any further validity to it. That's what a Catholic believes, old law versus new law. The veil of the temple was ripped in half, right? When the old law was fulfilled, the old covenant was abolished. He's condemned. He's dismissed. He's the old traditional. And they even say with a sneer, he's the Pope of the traditional Catholics. The saint, the greatest Pope of the 20th century, Pope St. Pius X, condemned, right? And all the conciliar popes who warmly embrace this new ecumenism, they've all been canonized. And I'm sure Francis will be canonized shortly after he dies, once he passes. He'll be canonized as well. And Zionists have become huge proponents of Vatican II. I'll bet a lot of you didn't know that. Because the reason that they're so supportive of Vatican II, the reason they're meddling in our church, which is exactly that's a perfectly apt way to describe it. They are insisting that you comply with Vatican II. I've had them say it to me. And do you know why they're insisting that we comply with Vatican II? Because they would have the world believe that the council, that Vatican II, is when the Catholic Church finally got over herself and put an end to 1,965 years of hate. It's a full-scale attack on the Catholic Church. Doesn't matter about what she did with hospitals and missions and higher education and lower education and soup kitchens, all these things that I've talked about for so long, the monasteries which literally built the hospital system throughout the world, taking care of the poor, doing so much good, building the greatest, the most beautiful culture and the arts ever in the history of man, right? Doesn't matter. All of that was part of a hateful institution. So you see, black has become white. White has become black, you see? And I know this from firsthand, back in 2007, this newspaper, before Remnant TV was going on, the Southern Poverty Law Center, the SPLC, which is a Jewish fundraising advocacy organization, kind of a joke now, but they specialize in civil rights, right? And they launched an attack on this newspaper and on moi, me personally, accusing us of being essentially a hate group. Rhonda Brownstein from the SPLC called me up one morning, and do you know why she accused us of being a hate group? Are you sitting down? She said it's because we reject Vatican II. This Jewish lady calls me up. You don't comply with Vatican II. And you know what she said specifically we don't comply with? Nostra Aetate, the document of the Second Vatican Council. They're demanding compliance with it. So if you go to the Southern Poverty Law Center's website right now, you can read this. Quote, while radical traditionalists have criticized the Church's theological and liturgical reforms in the wake of Vatican II, they have reserved special ire for the Council's efforts to mend Catholic-Jewish relations, beginning with the 1965 declaration Nostra Aetate. This is from a secular Jewish organization called the Southern Poverty Law Center. Do you begin to see what's going on here? Do you see why Pope Francis is canceling the Latin Mass based on the exact same thing? The traditional Catholics, they're not in union with, they don't accept enough of Vatican II, right? He got his marching orders from the Zionist propagandists. You see how huge this is? Is it possible to obsess over something that is so integral to what we believe, to geopolitics, to what's happening in the world today? As Christianity fades away and Zionism rises up, you think we're just kind of obsessing over this as a minor story? No, this is the only story that matters in the world today. Now, let's be really clear. This idea that we somehow reject Vatican II because we hate the Jews, this is complete fake news. And you can verify this. Anybody can verify this. And they know it's fake news too, that they're not looking to be truthful here. It just works because nobody knows the truth. But what is a traditional Catholic? Traditional Catholics are not a political group. We are a religious group, right? Our whole point and purpose is to try to save our souls, try to raise our kids, right? Practice our faith. So we know, you know, that according to Catholic moral theology, to hate people, to blame people as Christ killers and all of this stuff would be to jeopardize our mortal souls. So if we don't care about our mortal souls, why are we here in the first place? Why are we doing this? Why are we trying to go to the Latin Mass? So that we can become better haters? It's completely a contradiction in terms. You know that, we know that, the world doesn't. And that's what they're counting on. You know that, we know that. What did Christ say? What does Jesus Christ say from the cross? What does he say? He says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. You tell me on what grounds I can go on hating Jews then if Jesus, moments before he died, forgave them, his people. Hatred of Jews, hatred of anyone is offensive to Almighty God. It's a mortal sin. So what are they really doing? What's actually going on here? Well, it's a political stunt. Fake news always has a point, doesn't it? It's always to promote a certain narrative, a certain agenda. So when they say traditional Catholics reject Nostra Aetate in Vatican II, what they mean by that is that we reject their contention that the Catholic Church for 1,965 years, which is when Vatican II ended, that the entire time the Catholic Church has been a hate group. From the beginning, it's been a hate group. And if you as a Catholic object to that, wait a minute, we don't hate anybody, oh, you're an anti-Semite. Because you won't accept our interpretation, our spin, that it's always been a hate group, that the Bible itself is hate literature, right? Oh, you don't believe me? You think I'm exaggerating? Here, believe it or not, this next clip comes right from the American Jewish Committees. The American Jewish Committee had a 50th anniversary celebration of Vatican II, and wait for it, Nostra Aetate. And here's where they came right out and said, and right out and admitted that that's their problem. We are a hate group. We are haters. Admit it, Catholics, or you're anti-Semites. You confirm your anti-Semitism if you don't accept what we say about your church.
Nostra Aetate reversed nearly 2,000 years of Christian hostility towards Jews and Judaism that had led to centuries of violence, ghettos, inquisitions, expulsions, and forced conversions.
So according to this Christophobic narrative, Vatican II, again, is when the Catholic Church finally stopped hating the Jews.
Logically, I hope you will see in a moment if this is not familiar with you, I should have actually started even before the other Christian speakers. Why? Because the origins of Nostra Aetate are not a desire of the bishops of the Second Vatican Council to address the relationship between the Church and world faiths. The origins of Nostra Aetate are the result of Pope John the 23rd, Angelo Roncalli, to whom Dr. Samak referred to at length, his charge to Cardinal Augustin Bea to address the relationship of the Church with the Jewish people, De Judaeis. Why? This was overwhelmingly the impact of the Shoah, of the Holocaust. The Holocaust was overwhelmingly a Jewish tragedy, but it was substantially a Christian scandal. Why was it a Christian scandal? Because it was perpetrated by overwhelmingly baptized Christians in ostensibly Christian lands. Of course, the Shoah was, as Pope Benedict XVI has described it, a pagan enterprise. But it couldn't have succeeded to the degree it did with the extermination of 6 million Jews if the land had not been tilled over centuries with what was called the teaching of contempt. The teaching of contempt was the predominant attitude within the Christian world that says the Jews were rejected by God, indeed even cursed by God, condemned to wander. Indeed, they were the enemies of God, therefore in league with the devil. They were diabolical, and therefore they deserved everything they got. And they were condemned to wander. That kind of theology created the sense of dehumanization of the Jew that facilitated the enormity of the tragedy.
Now, to defend against this is to legitimize it. So I don't even like to defend against something so ridiculous. This is sick and perverse on its face. It's contrary to everything the Catholics believe. We don't hate anyone. God is love. The opposite of hate is apathy. To hate, the opposite of love is apathy, right? If you don't care or you hate, you're not a godly person. You can't possibly say that you follow Jesus Christ, who is love, and then dehumanize and hate a whole group of people, let alone the people of our Lord himself. And over and above that, think about what you learned in Catholic schools, those of you who went to Catholic school. Every single one of us, Catholic school kids, had little coloring books and whatnot in the first grade. We were taught to love the players in the story of the Incarnation. We were taught to love Mary Magdalene deeply, to admire her courage. She's a Jewish woman standing at the foot of the cross. Loved her. She's a hero, as is St. John, standing there at the foot of the cross. All of the apostles, right? The daughters of Jerusalem weeping for Jesus along the Via Dolorosa. The Jewish daughters of Jerusalem. I hate them. They're weeping for our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Those are the Jewish people at the time. Our Blessed Mother, St. Joseph, the early martyrs of the Colosseum. We grew up loving them all and listening to the words of Jesus from the cross over and over again. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. That's what actually happened with little Catholic kids for 1,000 years. So what's really going on here? Why is there this hateful Christophobic propaganda just will not go away. I'll tell you what's going on here. It's spiritual warfare against the church founded by Jesus Christ. We're just collateral damage. We're just the folks who got in the way. The little people are just trying to follow Jesus Christ. That's our crime. Believing, as our church has taught for 2,000 years, that the church that was founded by Jesus Christ, that it is necessary for salvation for all men, not just for us, for all men. And so we lovingly share that faith with our brothers. That's the history, that's what's really going on. And this idea that there's no salvation outside the Catholic Church, again, we might be wrong about that, or not. That's the debate that we would have with our non-Catholic friends, brothers, right? And had it for 1,000 years without resorting to, hate and warfare against them, right? But this is, like it or not, this is, know it or not, understand it or not, this is a defined dogma of the Catholic Church. You have to accept it. And what they're saying now is, if you accept it, that's religious supremacism. You're a criminal. You are a hater. If you accept a dogma that, according to our church teaching, you must accept in peril of your soul. And so, Vatican II, the spirit of Vatican II, right, set about 50 years ago, removing this clarity in teaching, so that 50 years after Vatican II, the vast majority of Catholics today reject the dogma of the Catholic Church, the dogma extra ecclesia, they reject it. There's no salvation outside of the church which Jesus Christ founded, right? And so in the name of false ecumenism, in the name of the spirit of Vatican II, the vast majority of Catholics today reject Christ then as the sole means of salvation. And we virtue signal about, everybody's saved, it's fine. That's what we started at the top of the show with Cardinal Dolan. Absolute lack of any clarity as to what we actually believe anymore. If everybody's saved, then maybe nobody is, right? And what difference does it make? Why did Christ come down from heaven? Why did the incarnation happen? Why did he spill his blood? Why did he die on the cross? If it doesn't matter which religion you belong to, he's just going to take everybody to heaven. It's all pointless. And that's the message that the vast majority of Catholics today have gotten. It's pointless. It's silly. It's stupid. So why in the hell should I bother going to Mass on Sunday? Even Pope Francis is out there saying that all religions lead to God. Okay, well, I'd rather be at the lake thinking about church than in church thinking about the lake. I'm not going to go to Mass, right? So what are we looking at then, friends? We're looking at a global apostasy. We're in the middle of a global holy war against the word of Jesus Christ. And that's why the discussion of what's happening in Israel, for example, or in American politics, or Vatican II, that's why it is so important. Because if we don't get this right, we too will cease to be Christian. You see how important it is? All of this is connected. What they're saying basically is, unless you are an anti-Semite, you will bless genocide in Israel because, well, those are God's chosen people still. So the old law is still in play. Nothing happened with the crucifixion. Nothing that matters. Similarly, unless you're an anti-Semite, you will accept that your church for 1,965 years was a hateful organization. You must accept that. It was responsible for the Holocaust. If you deny that, you are, on some level, you're a threat to society. Because another Holocaust will happen. It's because of people like you, Catholics like you, traditional Catholics who still hold to those old hateful ways. It's going to happen again.
In 1959, Pope John XXIII called for a church-wide council, in part to rethink the church's relationship to Judaism following Catholic self-reflection in the wake of the Holocaust. The Pope chose Cardinal Augustin Bea to head a key commission on the subject. Cardinal Bea met with AJC leaders and invited AJC to submit analysis of anti-Jewish elements in Catholic teaching in the US, Europe, and South America. AJC's leaders also urged Cardinal Bea to consider a dramatic transformation in Catholic-Jewish relations and introduced him to the revered Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. Rabbi Heschel pressed Bea and the Church to view Jews as partners in repairing the world rather than as potential converts.
Even Wikipedia has it that, quote, as a representative of the American Jews at the Second Vatican Council, Rabbi Hesch persuaded the Catholic Church to eliminate or modify passages in its liturgy that referred to an expected conversion of the Jewish people to Christianity. He believed that no religious community could claim a monopoly on religious truth. End quote. Now, do you begin to see what was really going on with that little FBI investigation of the Latin Mass parishes that was going on under Joe, the Catholic Biden? You see what was really going on? This was going on. If you think it's necessary to take the divine commission of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ seriously, to go out and convert all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son, well, you're a religious supremacist who rejects Vatican II, which taught all of us to hold that there are many paths to God other than the one established by Jesus Christ. You see how serious this is? Where does this take us ultimately? This idea, well, Jesus Christ, yeah, whatever. Sunday morning, I guess, and he was a great philosopher for sure. Where does it take us if we begin to just doubt him and to throw the whole thing into a cocked hat if it doesn't really matter and ecumenism trumps it all anyway, and getting along is the most important? Where does it take us? It takes us exactly to where we are today. It takes us to the unraveling of the entire Catholic raison d'etre, right? The salvation of souls through the only true church, which was founded by Jesus Christ. You see, you lose that clarity. It's gone already for the most part, except in traditional Catholic enclaves, and it's being crushed there now, whether by the FBI or the Vatican. Do you see why? Do you see why this is so huge? This topic, what's happening to us? If you defend the traditional teachings of the church, you are in effect defending the stuff that gave the world the horrific Holocaust. And no Catholics know their history or their theology enough to defend against that anymore, because we've been dumbed down so seriously by the spirit of Vatican II. We don't even know, as Cardinal Dolan just pointed out, how to observe Lent anymore. And you can yab about this all day long. You can say, yeah, but what about Christians suffering all over the world? Because they are. That's the number one group suffering persecution in the world today are Christians.
Jesus told his followers that they would be targets, hunted, arrested, and made to stand witness before governors and kings. Today, persecution is just as real, and in many countries, being a Christian is just as risky. 380 million Christians currently experience high levels of persecution and discrimination for their faith. That's 1 in 7 believers worldwide. Discover how you can stand with them at opendoorsuk.org.
Do we get to talk about that? Do we get to talk about how long that's been the case? How long Christians, because our revolutionary dogma of the faith is to turn the other cheek, right? We're not really great at revenge and fighting back, right? We're easy. They pick on Christians, and they've been doing it for centuries. Never mind that for centuries Christians have been suffering and dying under persecutions, starting when the founder of Catholicism, of Christianity, was crucified as a criminal on a cross. And moving a little bit further, we have the lions at the Circus Maximus. The Christians slaughtered, the assassination of Thomas Becket, execution of Thomas More, and the martyrs of Tyburn. On the Boxer Rebellion later on in China, 500,000 slaughtered in the Vendée. Kings and queens beheaded, nuns, priests slaughtered, cathedrals burned and broken all over Europe by the Enlightenment. The Catholic cathedrals, the Catholic centers trashed, burned, monasteries stolen by King Henry VIII. Thousands of Mexican Catholics hanging from telegraph poles. In Mexico's Freemasonic revolution against the cross, Turkish massacres in Armenia. In the past 2,000 years, it's estimated that at least 70 million Christians have been killed, slaughtered. 2/3 of that 70 million in the past 100 years alone in the bloodbaths of the Soviet Union, Communist China, and Nazi Germany. Now, as an aside, I know something about that last one. My father gave 4 years of his life fighting the very people who were responsible for the Holocaust. He fought in the European theater for 4 years in World War II. Here, in fact, I can show you, Walter can Get a camera on this. This is my father receiving the Bronze Star for his work in U.S. intelligence in the war. Here's my father's actual Bronze Star for his work in Army intelligence, U.S. Army intelligence in the war against the Nazis. Here's his ID card. I could just go on all day. I've got all of this stuff here if anybody's curious. His ID card for U.S. armed forces in the Middle East during World War II, the war against the Nazis. Somewhere in here are his dog tags. Dog tags, World War II, for Pete's sakes. But wait, there's more. Here's a little photograph that hopefully Walter can zoom in on. That's my grandfather, Joseph Matt, KSG, being awarded Germany's Federal Meritorious Cross, Germany's highest honor for his work in opposing Hitler's National Socialists during World War II. You know who that is? Giving my grandfather that medal? That's Theodor Hess, the first president of West Germany after the war, who in 1956 traveled from Germany to St. Paul, specifically to honor my grandfather for his work in the Catholic Press Apostolate, his tireless fight against Adolf Hitler, a madman who, together with Joseph Stalin, exterminated millions of Catholics and Christians in Europe. In this book, we were on the home front, getting attacked again by the purveyors of fake news, by the Hollywood leftists. Here is a newspaper clipping, interestingly enough, from 1944 when my grandfather and my uncles had to sue members of the Hollywood left, such as actor Orson Welles, for libel against the Catholic newspapers that they were publishing at the time. Right? So what's the point of this show and tell? Enough with the anti-Semitism charge. It's BS. Enough. That's not going to work on me. It's not going to work on us. That is fake news. It's slander. It's libel. It's perverse. And it's sick. And it's the same type of thing, the same fake news, the same fake loaded charges, right? The modus operandi being used right now to cajole American conservatives, pro-lifers, Christians, to bless Israel's ethnic cleansing in the Holy Land, because if you don't, you're an anti-Semite. Now, this is not going to end well if we don't wake up soon as to what is really, really going on. And there are many people out there right now who are trying to get the word out. All we need to do as Catholics is stop being so cowed and bullied and intimidated and just look at the facts.
Israel is saying no compromise. We will rule over 8 million Palestinians. No problem. And that's why the regime has been called an apartheid regime. Right. And they think that they have the United States wrapped around their little finger, that the U.S. does whatever they say. People in the United States should understand Netanyahu has been probably the main cause of these disastrous wars that the United States has been in for the last 20 years.
So if you won't listen to him, and many of you won't listen to me, preferring once again to just do your little part by shouting anti-Semite, ugly names like that, instead of listening to what's going on, right? Remaining with your head buried in the sand. You won't listen to him, you won't listen to me. Maybe you'll listen to this guy, because I find this man quite profound.
Miko Peled is a peace activist who dares to say in public what others still choose to deny. Born in Jerusalem in 1961 into a well-known Zionist family, his father, Matti Peled, was a young officer in the War of 1948 and a general in the War of 1967, when Israel conquered the West Bank, Gaza, Golan Heights, and Sinai. Miko's unlikely opinions reflect his father's legacy. General Peled was a war hero turned peacemaker.
It's time to sweep away some of the myths and to uncover the truth so that we can finally live in peace together. It turns out that the creation of Israel had not, after all, been a haphazard fight in which the Arabs fled their homes due to the directives of their own leaders. It had been an unprovoked, systematic campaign of ethnic cleansing by the Jewish militia involving massacres, terrorism, and the wholesale looting of an entire nation.
I know what you're going to say. Well, what about the terrorists? We've gone over this. When you trigger and terrorize young men, you're going to end up with a problem with terrorism in the other direction. Everybody's admitting that. So what about the Palestinian terrorists? This Jewish guy covers that as well.
My father, who was a military expert, had spent the remainder of his life after he retired from the military fighting for justice for the Palestinian cause. And being a former military man, he was often asked about Palestinian terrorism. On one such occasion, when he was being interviewed by the Israeli television, he said this about terrorism. He said, "Terrorism is a terrible thing, but the fact remains that when a small nation is governed by a larger power, terrorism is the only means at their disposal." My father's predictions have all come true. Now, the work of the Israeli lobby in the United States notwithstanding, more and more people around the world are beginning to realize that there are in fact two nations who live between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean, and that the conditions under which Palestinians live are completely unacceptable.
You know, before we transform Gaza with the help of our Christian Zionist friends, before we transform Gaza, and that's another thing, I find the Christian Zionists much more offensive than anything the Jews are doing right now. I just can't believe these people. They're so angry, they're so full of hate, they're so confused, they're so heretical, so heartless and soulless. You know? Before we let them transform Gaza into the largest open-air mass grave in the world, don't you think we should at least listen to the Jews?
And I remember the stories of the Israeli Air Force pilots who flew sortie after sortie, dumping hundreds of tons of bombs on a civilian population in Gaza, and would then return home to celebrate the festival of Hanukkah. See, because the attacks in Gaza at the end of 2007 took place during the Jewish festival of Hanukkah. Then, these same pilots, having celebrated with their families, slept in the comfort of their beds, got up the next day, and did it again and again and again. So for these young Israeli pilots, these young men who most Israelis and Israeli supporters around the world consider their finest, this was really nothing but shooting fish in a barrel as they began their merciless onslaught at exactly 11:25 in the morning on December the 27th, 2008. And that date, December 27, 2008, will forever be etched in our memories as the darkest and most shameful day in the long history of the Jewish people. As Israel began a shameful and merciless attack on the people of Gaza. The attacks began at 11:25 in the morning, the precise time that the children of Gaza are on the streets. Between 11 and 11:30, children of Gaza are either on the way to school or on the way home from school, as that is the time that the two shifts of the school day.
Now, in a dog-eat-dog world, right? If you want to know what forgiveness looks like, what looks like an awfully Christian take on forgiveness, let's look at the Jewish guy again, one more time.
Then, in the fall of 1997, disaster. My niece Madar was killed by Palestinian suicide bombers in Jerusalem. Several hours later, there we were, driving along the road to the cemetery. Police escorted our procession on motorcycles, making way for vans carrying the devastated family members of another Jewish casualty. As we got out of the van, someone approached and asked me to carry the small coffin. My heart felt far heavier than the heartbreakingly slight weight on my shoulders. Israelis and Palestinians, family members and friends, famous leaders and ordinary people, all came to give eulogies and to express their sorrow at this unspeakable loss. Smadar, my niece, was laid to rest near my father, her grandfather, in a small hilltop cemetery just outside Jerusalem. To this day, my sister Nurit cannot forgive herself for leaving her baby girl out alone in the cold, damp ground. But when my sister did come out to greet the mourners, the thousands who came to mourn, she did not ask for retaliation. She did not talk about revenge. The first words that came out of her mouth were these: "No real mother would want the same horror to happen to another mother.
So this is the spirit. This is the Christian, truly Christian spirit. I mean, here's a man who lost a family member to a Palestinian terrorist, and he's still talking like this. This is the way we should all be talking. This is what's required of us as followers of Jesus Christ, especially what's going on in the Holy Land, right? So instead of forever bombing the hell out of these people and supporting those who are, why don't we try to do what this guy's trying to do?
I knew I had to do something, and I knew that the right thing to do was to meet with Palestinians. And I did this right here in San Diego, and I was welcomed by the warm embrace of the local Palestinian community. The experience of meeting with Palestinians was comforting, it was liberating, and it was also heart-wrenchingly difficult. It was comforting to know that we're all very similar. And it was liberating to know that we don't have to be enemies. But it was heart-wrenchingly difficult to realize that I did not have full possession of the truth. And that is where I think Israeli supporters, mostly Jews, that's I think where most of them are. And I think it's time for Israeli Jews and American Jews to join what was very eloquently described by Clovis Maksoud as the constituency of conscience.
Friends, as followers of Jesus Christ, as traditional Catholics, we simply have to do our part. We cannot support this. We cannot let it go on. For God's sake, wake up and tell these conservatives, these so-called pro-life politicians, these warmongering neocons, these heretical Christian Zionists, tell them, not again, not in our name, not in the name of pro-life Christian America, not in the name of Jesus Christ.